The fourth essential element of trading card game design is somewhat obvious, especially given the previous element, but it can be very easy to overlook. Rules-based interaction covers the prescribed interaction between cards and players built into the rules, using card stat numbers and usually taking the form of some kind of combat. However, this is far from the only interaction taking place in trading card games. Notably, it leaves out effect-based interactions. Effect-based interactions are interactions with the opponent based on effects, which are specific instructions written on the cards themselves. When you're creating a card game, it's more or less a given that you'll be including some amount of effect interaction. After all, cards in a TCG need abilities, not just numbers. And in the course of making those abilities, some will inevitably interact with the opponent. What might be a little bit less obvious is just how much influence these abilities have on gameplay. When you're teaching a new player, you're likely to teach them the rules, but you're not likely to go over all of the various effect interaction that's available within that game. To do so would likely mean reciting the abilities of most of the cards printed in the game, and you don't want to be throwing a textbook at somebody who's just interested in trying out a new card game. And even if you could, part of the fun of TCGs is discovering all of the various effects available to include in your deck. But as the players begin to learn more and more about the game and they start to become a bit more competitive, they're going to pick up some hard and fast rules about how interaction works within that game. For example, in Magic the Gathering, your super cool, ultra rare, mega powerful 7-mana dragon creature can be destroyed with a common 2 to 3 mana removal spell. Likewise, that powerful field of creatures you spent several turns pulling together can all be swept away by a single wrath effect. The availability and costing of these effects go a long way to establishing the three main archetypes of the game: aggro, control, and midrange. Other games will likely have at least somewhat similar archetypes, but depending on what removal is available, how powerful it is, how much it costs, and what counterplay is available to that removal, how all of these archetypes actually work during gameplay can differ quite a lot between games. This is important not just for the players looking to improve their skills and understanding of the game, but also for the designers of the game as they move on to create the play environment and the overall game balance. Beyond this, effect interaction also has a few additional effects on game design to consider. For one, it increases the scope of available interaction. Rules interaction is at its best if it is very simple and straightforward. However, these simple systems can make it difficult to interact with fringe strategies within a game. For example, most games don't have anything in their combat rules to counteract strategies that use the graveyard. Strategies that can't be interacted with are dangerous, since if they end up more powerful than intended, they don't have any counterplay and can easily end up dominating a game. Effect interaction not only allows players to answer a wider range of threats and win conditions, but it also makes it safer for the game to print these alternate strategies in the first place, since they are also able to print counterplay to them. In addition to answering specific niche strategies, effect interaction can also help answer flaws in the game's rules as well. Rules interaction is very static. Once the game is released, major revisions to the rules are very unlikely. It would confuse the new players suddenly faced with two sets of conflicting rules, and just frustrate established players who are already pretty comfortably familiar with the old rule system. So what happens if it turns out the combat system in your game is a little bit too slow and perhaps overly prone to stalls? Or the initial resource mechanic you came up with was a bit too onerous on high-cost cards, making those high-cost cards effectively unplayable. Or just what happens if a certain deck or strategy is winning games a turn or two faster than the game designers intended. A minor tweak to removal costs, or the available evasion abilities, or placing targeting resistance on high-cost cards, or just adding more general counterplay to the game can make a big difference on how these games end up playing out, and this is a much easier adjustment than a major rules change. After all, in trading card games, regular releases of new card effects are already an expected part of the game. Life systems, resource engines, and rules interactions are all very straightforward, but these three elements on their own are not going to allow for all that many different card designs. What does allow for the vast depth of card design TCGs are known and loved for is a wide range of powerful, exciting effects written in the card's text box that will help the player win the game, and also the effects that interact with this variety of strategies. They simultaneously open up huge swaths of design space, but also provide the tools to interact with this diversity of design, as well as manage how these strategies all contribute to the pace and play within the game. As such, carefully considered and precision-crafted effect interaction is an essential element within trading card game design.